Welcome back. This is Daybreak, and thank you for staying with us. Daniel Orogo is governance and analyst and commentator. Eugene Oponyo is the chairperson, Wazalendo Movement. Mark Ouko is the youth coordinator, the National Students Council. Hussein Khalid is the chief executive officer of the Vocal Africa organization. And Njeri Kahiga is the national youth leader, the PNU party. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for staying with us. Dan, has the church and the places of worship, or religion by extension, provided the political class who today stand accused of corruption, culture of lies, misplaced priorities, human rights violations, and overtaxation with the platform to convey that messaging to the masses?
Well, it's been so. And I think the interconnection between religion and politics, I think you could trace it, that has been anciently a problem. In the classical time, I think you would have known in different regimes how religion was so much hell-bent in politics, in a sense that there are some certain states who are actually theocratic, and still so, that some government or some states, you realize that the head of religious institution is the supreme political leader of those countries. And it's so. And I think for our country, by the fact that post-independence and, as we are working through our constitution, the separation of the religion and politics has really helped a lot. But of course, there have been interconnectedness in a sense that we've seen, and I'm talking about religion before I come to church in itself, that we've seen that religious institutions with readily available masses has been a platform readily available for politicians to address the public and also to further their manifestation. Is a readily available platform. In the sense that religion has a sense on, vetoing some decisions that Mwananchi could see as a reality. And that if a politician is given that readily available platform, then they become their messaging becomes a reality to people. I think there's a sense in which, as we were headed to 2022 general elections, and especially in certain regions in this country, you could have spotted there was a lot of fundraising. There's a lot of, church building and church movements where politicians were equally going there and giving resources. And in that sense, then, it could have been very difficult that the church in itself then could have disassociated itself with what the political class is doing right now. And I think all of us in the set are actually asking then, what was the point of departure? In a sense that we've seen a key critical religious leaders and the church leaders that looked like they were supporting the government, right now are in variance with the government. I mean, Ayub, you've seen scathing attacks again. Reverend Teresia Wairimu said, this is not a government that she now recognizes. You've seen a number of people saying, a number of religious leaders, including now the Catholic, Church as an institution. So I think what Kenyans are actually struggling with is then what happened. The clarification that the church and the state were seen as one way, as one, and their messaging was one. Now that the church has gone ahead and now providing a scathing attack, to the government, then now that becomes a confusing element to the people. But as I conclude, it is important, I keep on saying, I think my colleagues has mentioned it, the people and the government is signing a treatise. They're signing an agreement that once we give you the power, then you are responsible for our security. There's a social contract the people and the government do. That is what really works in elections. Okay. Is that we are giving you power to make sure that we are safe, that our properties is safe, and that our education is provided for, and that the health is guaranteed. So if that doesn't happen, then it doesn't depend where you are. You have the right to question the functioning of the state. And it doesn't make that you are hypocritical. It is just that you are doing your civic responsibility as so.
Yeah. And Njeri, does the statement by the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops, in effect, has it exposed underperformance on the part of key institutions created by the Constitution? Certainly we are not a theocracy, but there is influence religion holds in a democracy like ours, but there are institutions that we created under Katiba 2010. Are they functioning as required? Is this also an indictment on the part of institutions that ought to be holding the government to account?
I think it's now clear that the Parliament, Senate, everybody else just functions when it's a political thing in question, because when the impeachment of the former deputy president was on the table, we saw every other politician try to show us how serious they were with this thing because they need the government to move forward. But now when the institution religion raises the concerns that Kenyans have been asking every other day, you won't see them ask questions. I've not even seen any member of parliament rise to question the question of femicide, which is an alarming issue that is happening in this country as per now. I've not seen them question this question of SHIF. Nobody is even concerned to bother that Kenyans are saying that this shifting period is, we are losing more lives as we wait for the transition to be smooth enough. But I think by now Kenyans are aware that the politicians that they elected back in 2022 no longer care about what happens to them. For them, if it's not political, they are not involved. If it involves the Kenyan, they are not involved. But if it involves their stomachs, if it involves a term limit, you'll see them in parliament. You saw the other time when impeachment was happening, we had a full house. For the first time in the history of that whole house, we had a full house. Then the next day, when we are supposed to be discussing more fundamental issues, the house had to be adjourned because we don't have quorum. When Kenyans are raising concerns, or when issues that are regarding to the Kenyan voter are being discussed, you will not see them. You will not see them raise it. They will not even be concerned. This Sunday, I would expect that now politicians will take the floor and go tell the government, SHIF is not working. You know, femicide is too much. But they will not do that. But if it was the case of impeachment this Sunday, every politician would be back in Mashinani telling wananchi, we want to take this person home because they are bothering our president. Okay. The president has said we need to take him home. So it's now in public domain that nobody cares. The institutions that are supposed to be raising concerns are no longer raising concerns as long as it's a Kenyan-based issue. But if it comes to anything that involves their salaries, you will see them in those houses. If it comes to anything that involves their allowances and their opulence and everything that revolves around them, you will see them try to make it look as if it's a very serious issue. And come 2027, I hope the Gen Z awakening, and I hope that these awakening that Kenyans have gotten, whereby today we are in a country where you cannot even lie to Mama Mboga about how revenue is raised, how taxes should be used. So I hope this information that Kenyans have acquired over time will help them make more better, sober decisions when it comes to 2027.
Yeah, and Eugene, in effect, is this also an indictment on the political class to the extent that they were told by the bishops and largely the institution of religion that they are selfish, they are self-serving, and they are selective?
Thank you. But before I respond to your question, kindly allow me to say this. Yeah. Everyone, or rather Khalid here said the Ford Foundation wasn't funding protests, right? Why haven't there been such a protest like for the June 25th, if they haven't been funding? Why haven't there been any other protest, any serious protest in the country ever since then? So that's why I'm saying Kenyans are so hypocritical. Remember the other day, we were all over Kasmuel Makore, trying to say like he's the savior of the Gen Z. He's speaking for the people, he's speaking for the young people. What does he do? He joins ODM. If indeed he meant well for the young people, why did he join a party that has been there since we were kids? Why? Why didn't he form his own party? Why didn't he and other young people come up with a vehicle to steer ahead and advocate for the rights of the young people? So as much as we are saying the government is doing this in our wrong way, we are also on the same trajectory as the same government we are trying to critique. Another thing is, look at even Morara. Morara has been swindling money, asking money from Kenyans, from left, right, and center.
Allow me to point out this, Eugene. It's not fair to talk about a party that isn't here for right of reply.
Themselves, yeah.
So that remains your opinion, not that of Royal Media Services or Citizen TV. Yeah. But this is my question. Yeah. What was then the correlation between the funding of the protests and the overwhelming messaging by the young people who went to the streets who said, we don't want this finance bill, it's punitive. Just get it out of the window.
Yeah. I was even trying to still answer your first question. Yeah. So yeah, these are my sentiments. These are not sentiments for the Citizen TV. And I'm saying young people should not follow what we call blind optimism. Just because someone comes here to speak like he cares about the young people, now we follow them blindly. We are not going to do that. The peoples like Morara, that's why I'm calling them out.
No, I will again pose you,
okay,
for purposes of right of reply and the civility of this debate,
okay,
that you don't mention names of persons who are here.
Okay, let's move then. So now to your question. The church has played a very critical role in all this. Mentioning, pointing out problems, anyone can do that. Anyone can say, by the leo mvua imenyesha. And it's true, kumekuwa kukinyesha. But no one will say, how can we use this water to maximize and help us as young people, as a community, to develop our own plants, to do our own irrigation, and move forward. So as I was trying to link the protest with because the protest led to even the bishops come out to try to speak. So the messaging by the Gen Z, that's what I'm saying. We do have a sheep mentality. Look at X. People will do something because majority of the Kenyans are doing this challenge. If that challenge is not there, you will not see majority of the people. Let me tell you, if the government tries to change on how they do their messaging, if the government tries to change on how they do their communication, even young people still follow what the government is saying. Simply because we are so easy to be moved around by anyone. We don't, even right now, we don't have a leaning of our own. Why? We are still following these people, these old men and women in government. That's why the bishops will come out to say, look, this is where the government is going wrong. But they'll never tell you, just like my friend has said, these are the solutions we are giving as the bishops. These are the solutions we are giving to the protest. Look at the unemployment menace. The unemployment menace is skyrocketing. But all we care about is the government is not working on this. Think of it, Ayub. Each and every government institution has a budget, and this budget is funded by us. But think of it, if young people are so critical of what they need change to happen in this country, they could have said, we can see these ministries being run by people who are not of our age. Okay. We can see these appointments in government in youthful positions are not put there by the president, by the people of our age. Why can't we get our people in those offices? Because there's no way, even the other day we were blaming Honorable Raila Odinga for joining government. We cannot blame Honorable Raila Odinga for negotiating for his people. There's no way Honorable Raila Odinga would have negotiated for me or for Casmuel. We are not people of his age. But look at it, if I was there on that table trying to negotiate for the young people, I'll definitely pick young people as the cabinet secretaries. But if we let people who are not of our age, in their 70s and their 80s, to make decisions, that's why we are in this hole we are in. So
in essence, you're describing, as is the case, that the church described the political class of being selfish as also you be having such traits if given the opportunity to appoint people.
Not just the government or the politics. Politics began in the religion. Politics began in church. Politics began when Satan had an issue with God. That's where politics began. So we cannot say politics and religion, they do not correlate. So even the bishops are hypocritical. Even the bishops are selfish. Why? When the things were going good, when the government was trying to give them contracts to the institutions they run, they never spoke about this. But when there is a shift, a systemic shift, it's when we want to see them out.
What was the government giving the bishops?
Sorry?
What was the government giving the bishops?
They have institutions they are running as hospitals.
Hospitals?
Yes, they have schools.
And you know that claims for the hospital is made procedurally for you to get the funding, right?
Exactly.
So it wasn't a privilege or a right?
It wasn't a privilege or a right. But this is what I'm saying. You're benefiting from the same government you're saying. You have been benefiting since 1963.
But the point is the bishops are Kenyans. Don't they have the right to be part of the beneficiaries? The government must serve as the people of Kenya. I expect, just hang on, Eugene, I expect Archbishop Muhatia Morris, who yesterday read the press statement, and those who were in his company who flanked him, they are all Kenyans. They are not from heaven.
I haven't said they are Kenyans. I'm only saying they should not say...
Do they have the right to benefit from government services?
Of course.
So what's wrong with the government funding institutions that they run procedurally?
This is my point, Ayub. You easy to answer, but you're not easy to listen to what I'm saying. This is my point. The bishops have raised fundamental questions. But all I'm saying is, have they been speaking?
Of course. They have.
Yeah, they have
actually been speaking.
Yes, they did. I have statements of them.
They have been speaking.
I can read you. May I make my point? Because Eugene, what I was pointing out...
May I make my point before?
Let's give him his time. Hussein and Njeri, I'll come to you. Let's give him his fair share of time. the point I'm making, Eugene, is for proper understanding and context, is if they run institutions of healthcare,
yes,
and claims under the previous NHIF, under the current new model,
yes,
claims for funding or getting the money is made procedurally.
For sure.
It's not your name that is regarded highly.
Yeah.
It's what you do vis-a-vis what you are given back.
But that's where
how is that a
corruption
problem?
is. That's where corruption is.
Well, why is that a corruption?
That's what I've said. You haven't given me time to...
I did. The explanation was just that you are just going around my question.
Okay, may I
again ask you for clarity purposes.
Okay.
What's wrong with healthcare institutions run by, for example, the Catholic Church?
Yeah.
If they had done procedure, which is in healthcare,
yeah,
then you get that money procedurally. How is that a problem?
This is why I think it's a problem. And I'll be so critical on that. These guys get contracts from the government, the bishops and all that. Not just the bishops, all other fraternities. But this is my point. These guys haven't been speaking on matters of, oh, there's this, or there's that. You will hear them speaking about human rights activism or human rights violation, but you'll never hear them speaking about the nitty-gritties of the government. So they have been benefiting from the contracts of the government. But then, why have they come out right now to say, look, the government is not working here on this? How about during the Uhuru's tenure? Did they come out?
Yes, they did.
Now you see. Now, exactly. That is why it was.
Let me come to Sam. I'll get him
I think
finally, that is where it was headed.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so that we don't digress.
Yeah.
I think Eugene has answered himself. And, you know, the more we go down to that, for me, it's even very clear to every Kenyan what we're saying. Number one, let's remember what the bishops are doing, even in healthcare, is supplementing what the government is supposed to do. Those hospitals wouldn't be there, number one, if the government was doing its job of providing healthcare properly. If there were hospitals in all these places, because you'll find that most of those hospitals by the religious community, the religious sector, are in far-off places where the government has not even reached there. So before you even start criticizing, saying they're getting contracts and they're getting this, ask yourself, why are they there in the first place? Because you as a government are not delivering on your responsibilities to offer health care. Someone else is stepping in to do that for you. You can't now come back and criticize them when they ask for their fair share of what they have done. So let's be clear on that. Number two, let us also be very clear that any Kenyan, whether you are a religious leader, you are a politician, if you offer services as required by law to government, you have a right to demand for payment. And my biggest problem is this. Every time Kenyans come up with very clear criticism of government, instead of responding to that issue that has been raised, instead of us looking at where the problem is, you now try to go around circles, you circumvent, you try to look for excuses, or tribal, or these people, why didn't they speak? So let's say they never spoke. Okay. Let's say they've never spoken ever. They've been quiet all along. Does it mean that what they're saying right now is wrong? Let's say I'm Kikuyu. Or let's say I'm Kalenjin and I've raised this issue. Does it mean that that issue is non-existent? This is what politicians have, used so much. Every time you are accused of corruption, you've stolen, you say mtu wetu. What about the money that has been stolen? These are critical issues that Kenyans are asking. And as we said when we were discussing, Kenyans are not fools anymore. This generation, information technology and social media, everything is out there. You cannot hide the facts. And more importantly, fear is gone. People will raise these issues. You will try to hide it and, cover up and come up with another excuse and hide this. As he said, it's very difficult to defend what is not working. Okay. And what is clear to everyone is that this government is not working, is not performing, is not delivering on its own promises.
Yes, Mark.
I think after all has been said, I think the fundamental question that will then people ask is that, is there anything that will change, you know, after the rhetoric by the bishops, after the response from the political class? Is there anything that changes? And you look at this both from a short-term length and both at a long-term length. And there is a saying that says that the more things change, the more they still remain the same. I've heard there is a much say here about how the young people will change this country in 2027, how things will radically change in 2027. One thing that I think we must appreciate about the political class is that they know the voters class in which they need to target. And the voters class in which they know really well to target is the one from the religious background, the ones who are found in church. These are the people who go and vote. They're not the people who just make noise on X, on Facebook, and then during election they do not come. This is why the politicians really love the voters from the church, because they know this is a very serious voting bloc, and that's why they really love them. So if we look at it in terms of the short term, and in terms of the long term. In the short term premise, I think there will be so much incentives, especially from the online platform. People will be saying how the church, you know, has been speaking for them. This church is speaking to these issues that that the common man is speaking about. But if you look into the long term, it goes back to the sender, back to factory settings. The church will still be offering these politicians again the same platform in which they'll be cultivating the culture of lies and all that. So for me, the fundamental question that I still ask is that what then changes, you know, after all this rhetoric? If I had the church say that these are the radical measures that you are going to take, and we see the church is structurally contributing to, in fact, 2027, beyond 2027. They're saying that the political class, if you do not do this, even as our platform, we are not going to give you our platforms. But if things just go back, then it will be right from what I'd already said. The more things change, the more they still remain the same.
Yeah, and Dan, I'll come to you, because we will sample the feedback as well, because we're engaging the young people also watching this broadcast from home. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir Ibra. If we can get the first sample, then I'll go to Dan on the same. Here is what you're saying. MC_rumors says it was the same church that endorsed this so-called God-chosen government. Where was the voice of the church when youths were being killed and abducted during the Gen Z protests? Hypocrisy. Kenyans lost trust in government long time ago. Next is Bobo Tiono Owino, who says Catholic bishops have come out gun-blazing because the current regime have turned deaf ear to Kenyans' grievances, though too late, but better late than never. The youth views have no impact because they depend on the political bigwigs. They can't stand alone, just like we have witnessed during the Gen Z, who have been already consumed by then. Kiprop Kenya says, when we needed the church to speak up, they instead opened their gates and pockets to receive goodies from politicians. They led us to a ditch we are both in. Now they want to let us out. How? Sir Nixon Dugure says, Abraham Lincoln defined very well for us what democracy is. Unfortunately, we, Kenya, are fast approaching the ultimate inversion, the stage where the government is free to do anything it pleases, while the citizens may act only by permission. Kaka Edu says, what the government should ask itself is, why are people complaining? Has the economy really improved? Do Kenyans feel the economic improvement on the ground? Catholic bishops are only airing what Kenyans feel on the ground. Anne says the Catholic Church does not rush to speak out the national hills. But if they do, listen to them. Those who have ears hear. Let them hear. Mark Mbogo says, I find the statement by the bishops as dishonest, especially on the term limit extension, since the president and the ruling party have distanced themselves in totality. So the bishops should have addressed the mover and not the president. Hence, the government's response was timely and warranted. All right, just for clarification purposes as well, that was a private member's bill by Senator Samson Cherargei of Nandi County, and Kenyans sent in more than 200,000 submissions online to the extent that the server had crashed, and there was an overwhelming no to that term limit proposal contained in the private member's bill, which amongst other issues had more than 32 clauses seeking to amend other issues which was before the Senate committee chaired by the Bomet County Senator Wakili Hilary Sige. Yes, Dan, it seems there is a cocktail of feedback and also a responsibility on the doorstep of the church itself, and as to why it was silent when its voice was needed during the times when young people were abducted, killed, shot in broad daylight, and there was a wholesale silence from institutions that are today criticizing the government?
I think it's exactly what we said a while ago, the indictment of the church in specific and religion in totality. And of course, I've seen the opinion very varied. I mean, others in support, others in variance with, what is going on currently right now. But I've said, Ayub, we are at a point where we are, as the citizens of Kenya, do not want to keep quiet simply because we believe that certain institutions should be the ones speaking. And just like I've said, we have a very good constitution that gives us a freedom of speech, and that gives us an opportunity to publicly participate on matters that are very important, and very important as this one. So the Catholic Church, and especially the church in totality, and religion in general, should actually be speaking because they are the moral compass of a society. That the constituencies of those churches are Kenyans to some extent, the very, very grassroots Kenyans that are feeling and reeling from these particular issues that are affecting Kenyans. And to that say so, they have a right to speak. Let me also put this into perspective. Yeah. My colleagues were saying here, and my brother was mentioning, that why now? We are a bit confused about who has been speaking when and how. And I think let us put this into context. First, the Catholic Church, and especially the conference in itself, Ayub, and probably you can refer, has been constantly speaking on issues. And I think I'm not wrong, that we have been seeing on news, even if they don't appear to be addressing a press conference, there's always a written statement on the state of the nation. Was it pro-Gen Z and after Gen Z? The Catholic Church has consistently been speaking.
One year ago, for clarity, before the Gen Z, November 2023, they highlighted the high cost of living, overtaxation, jobless youth, challenges in the education sector, protecting the dignity of Kenyans, rising insecurity and stifling speech.
And that confirms what I was saying, is that each and every time that there is a pressing issue to a nation, this conference has been speaking vocally about it. And so it is within their space and within their right to actually vocalize what is affecting Kenyans, and to that so because of the constituency they hold, that we have mentioned. Let me also try to demystify a fact here. There have been a lot of documentation about the Gen Z protest and what is the outcome of that protest. And I think people have been swayed. There is a sense in which we can sway aside and become sensational about these issues and lose the objective touch it deserves. This protest has been documented on very many aspects, as my colleague has mentioned. One, the sporadic nature of this protest. That has been very well documented. Number two, on how technology aided this protest. And number three, on how the constituency of young people had been the one pioneering this protest. So I have been able, and I've belated this severally, looking at how we have misinterpreted this particular protest, in a sense that indeed we acknowledge could have been infiltrated by elements, by politicians, by everyone. That is synonymous to each and every protest, Ayub, globally. But we do not lose the objectivity of this protest, that in a deep sense, even if I don't know whether it was funded or not, we saw young people coming out to claim their civic space. In a sense, what happens is the pacification of political class. So let us give the devil his due, that we have for the first time seen young people rising up in arms, that they are questioning about the state of delivery of their, in their country. And they're sporadic on that. And the sense that this protest was even decentralized, that tells you a lot about it. Now, whether, politically, whether what responsibility, what I am saying is that that was a shot on target that was given by young people. Whatever comes in 2027, it is the responsibility of the protesters now to further their responsibility by voting correctly and voting the right leaders. I think let us be very objective.
All right. And Hussein, certainly 1982 changed the course of Kenya. I mean, dipping into dictatorship, a one-party system. It took the second liberation to make us a multi-party democracy. How far will the reverberations of June 25th go in the history of our country?
It is my hope that they will go extremely far. June 25th was a historical day for us. I think for the first time, and particularly because it was steered by the younger generation, the future of this country, the present and the future of this country. In 1982, it was, the guys in the Air Force and others, which then brought the one-party state. KANU ilikuwa baba na mama after that. But then we saw the uprising by the likes of Willy Mutunga, the former CJ, Khaminwa, Koigi, and others, And by the time we got to the 90s with Orengo and others, we had that movement up, running. And that is why we are here today. And we can enjoy the freedom that we are enjoying today because those people stood up and said no. That's why for me, June 25th should actually be marked as a national holiday because it is a day when Kenyans said and showed that they can speak up and say no to a government that is trying to, force a bill down their throats. And we had Kenyans who were killed, very young Kenyans on that particular day. They were shot outside of Parliament. Up to date, we're trying to look at who was actually inside Parliament who was shot, but people were outside in the streets. So June 25th, to me, I believe will be a monumentous day that will be carried forward, and we need to recognize that day because it is a day when the young people of this country say they want better for us all. They want better for their children. And that's why we have to ensure that that spirit does not die. And for many who are thinking, and I think somewhere it was alluded to, that, the Gen Z protests were and they've come and they've gone. I think we are underestimating the anger that Kenyans have in them right now. And I think right now all that is needed is just a spark. Kenyans are not happy. Those are just 7 key issues that were listed by the Catholic bishops. But there are many other issues that Kenyans are suffering from as we speak right now. And everywhere you hear a statement, unasikia the youth are saying, the streets are calling. That's what they're saying, the streets are calling. And we can't just keep, wishing things away. Because that is what politicians are doing. Critical issues, people are being abducted left, right, and center in broad daylight. And then the police are simply denying, and they think if they just come and say, it wasn't us, that is enough. You are the police service in this country. If anyone is missing, I saw a story yesterday on Citizen by Wala.
Yeah.
This guy was crying that he went and reported to the police. His wife was abducted. And they're asking him to bribe, to pay them so that they can follow up. And he was literally a full-grown man crying in tears. I mean, what's happening to this country? Why are institutions not functioning? And then when you come out, you raise these issues, you're told, because you didn't speak, you are this tribe, you are a religious sector. I mean, these are the people who are now leading us to now decide to take action back to the streets because they are not responding to the issues, promises that they made themselves. These are not people who came and forced you and told you, say this and say this and say that. You came up yourself and you said, we are going to cut down expenditure. We're going to cut down this. We're going to make sure this happens. We're going to take care of the families whose, kins were killed or something like that. And absolutely nothing is done. And then you come and you blame the people when they stand up to say this is not right. I think that to me is hypocritical.
Yeah, Eugene, minus the church, and these issues still are glaring, and they need to be addressed from a governance point of view. And how then do you think we need to address these problems minus the face of the church or any other party?
Thank you. That's so philosophical. The problems that bedevil Kenyans zinatuaffect sisi wote. Tuseme nini, akweni nani amesema, hizi ni shida zetu hapa. Ni sisi tu tutarudi tusuluhishe. So, we can only come up with solutions as young people. Because so far in this generation, we act like we are the ones with the information. But tumeshindwa tu kuwa na information ya kusolve a smaller thing or a bigger thing kama unemployment. So that's why unaona, we people from the Wazalendo Movement Africa, we came up with this movement to see on how we can, instead of saying the government hasn't done this, hasn't done that, what are we doing as the people? The way you're asking, what is now next? For us as the movement, even on Mazingira Day, last month on 10th, we mobilized over 1,200 young people in the Nairobi CBD, just to try to let people, and everyone had a tree, just trying to let people, like, we should not just be going to Nairobi CBD just for demonstrations of anti-government. We can go to Nairobi CBD to do a cleanup. We can go to Nairobi CBD to plant trees. We can go to Nairobi CBD to engage with other young people on other fundamental issues. Even on this month, on 29th of November, we'll be on at the Embakasi Garrison for the military event. We'll be planting trees with the military officers. Because why? We are bringing more than 32 counties in the Embakasi Garrison so that we can talk to young people about matters of patriotism. Because the military officers, they are the only people who understand what patriotism is. And the Uzalendo movement is Uzalendo. And that's why we are headed to the military. We have what we call Kenya Military Barracks Initiatives, where we are greening all spaces in the military. At the same time, we are doing what we call smart farming. Majority of the young people are complaining there are no jobs. But ukweli ni serikali itatuletea kazi. Ni sisi kama vijana, ni sisi kama Wakenya tuseme, look, these matters of food inahitajika kwa kila mtu. Wewe before kuja hapa lazima umekula. Ukitoka hapa lazima utahitaji chakula. Tutafanyaje tukue katika wale watu ambao wanasaidia kuzalisha chakula injini? Na the president has been so critical on that. If you look at the budget that was read a few months ago, it really stipulated on now the matters of production, the matters of the cost of production. You see, so as young people, I'm trying to let young people know in the movement, or to create movements, to create organizations, to create lobby groups, so that we don't only go out to the government to say, like, you weren't doing this right. We can only go to the government and knock this off and tell them, look, Ministry of the Youth, led by Honorable Murkomen, this is our ministry. He's not a youth, but this is our ministry. There are people in that ministry that are beyond our age that need to be removed. And hizo ndo vitu mimi ningeomba kama vijana kwetu tuna advocate kusema ya kwamba, kwa sababu kusema Ruto must go, hiyo ni kujaribu kukata mti na wembe. Ruto ataenda. Lakini tukisema kuna mtu kwa National Youth Council has not been well constituted, hiyo ni kitu ambayo inaweza fanyika. Tukisema hii ministry ya gender tupewe vijana, hiyo ni mambo inaweza fanyika. Tusiendelee kukaa hapa kila siku tunaongea mambo ambayo.
Just Mark, I'll come to you. But Eugene, wewe hukubamba venye gava inasema we are exporting 100,000 jobs to Germany. Unajua inakubamba? Inanibamba juu hata maboys wangu wameenda huko na wamerudi na ganji. Juu ya nini? There's no need tujichoche tunakaa hapa ta create employment na kuna employment tuna create. And this is now my question to you. Yes. What does that say then about our economy in terms of our government focusing on creation of jobs for us, putting money and creating the ample environment required for production and manufacturing, then which creates more jobs for us Kenyans. Then you have more Kenyans who will be on the employment sheet. Then you have more Kenyans who will be into the tax bracket. And then you have more Kenyans who you can decently and comfortably tax. Isn't that an issue that we need to address here? Ayub, in fact hata umejijibu. Angalia sana hii Kenya yetu watu wana depend on matters of dollar. Ukiangalia sana the remittance from majuu ilikuwa mingi sana kuja hii nchi. Hiyo ndo tumekuwa tukidepend on. So tukikuwa the first people kwanza kusema ati hatutaki wa Kenya wenzetu ama ndugu zetu ama dada zetu waende nje kupata kazi kwa sababu tutashindwa create kazi hapa, tunajidanganya. For instance, I have a friend in Germany. This guy, we had an event on 10th of Mazingira Day. Huyu jamaa alitusupport. Unaona, angekuwa kapa na sisi, hana kazi na sisi, nani angetusupport? Okay, let me ask. Hizo ndio vitu tunajaribu kusema. And I'm asking you this again. Na at the same time, I'll ask you this. Vile yeye alitoa hiyo kidogo alitoa, ilisaidia kulipa mtu mwingine ambaye tulikuwa tumemcontract kama Wazalendo, aweze kutusaidia kurun event. And we creating an employment. Yetu jamaa yuko hapa, lakini tungesema hatutaki wa Kenya waweze kutoka hapa kwenda kupata kazi. Tungepata aje usaidizi kutoka ambao wa Kenya ambao wako majuu. And Makiu, the majority of the people wanakuambia hapa
oh, usiende majuu, utaenda kufia Saudi Arabia, sijui utaenda kufia wapi. Hao ndio watoto wao ama wazazi wao wanaenda huko. So hao wenye waendi, hao wenye waendi,
yes,
ndio sisi tunabaki hapa, mtu anakuambia hapana usiende huko. Look at the people applying for the government jobs in Qatar. Look at the people applying for the jobs wenye walikuwa wameenda kufanya mambo ya ukulima. Kwa sababu sasa hivi upende usipende, hatuwezi kula computer. Tunahitaji chakula ndugu yangu.
Okay, that's what I'm asking you again. This is my question. You talked about remittances.
Yes.
What's the contribution of this to our GDP growth?
I really can't be specific on that. I'm not good with numbers.
Does it have more contribution in your view than agriculture?
No.
No, of course no. But is so, it?
And you just said that
tourism.
And you just said raise that matter, which you said that it has more contribution than any other sector in our economy.
I haven't said it has more contribution than any other economy. I've said these guys moving the other end. Hata ndo wanatusaidia hiyo agriculture yenye unasema kufanyika hapa nchini.
Okay.
Kwa sababu tukikaa hapa huna pesa utafanya nini?
Thank you so much. You know I'm the only lady in this room.
Yeah, please. And sorry you have been silent.
And I want to first of all raise the concern of femicide. We really need to see everybody stand up and raise this thing, because at the end of the day it will no longer be women being killed. We'll get to a point where it's all genders, and it has been, it's just that the numbers have not been as high as it has been for the last 3 months in regards to the female gender. But I again want to ask the government, because we learn and sometimes maybe we should borrow a leaf, and I was thinking by the virtue of, you know, today is a Friday and we are young people, I was thinking today in the evening every entertainment joint is going to be having a supply of whatever customers are going to be asking for. But today morning, if you walk into any dispensary, any hospital, there are no medicines. Maybe it's time that the government tries to sit down with people who stock up alcohol or drinks and understand how are they able to supply very early in the morning. Then they can use that method to supply medicines into our dispensaries. They can use that method to try and ensure that every government institution is stocked up with whatever Kenyans need. Because I've never understood, Ayub, how business people who run entertainment joints are able to stock up every day. Those we see rollies everywhere running across the country, supplying to their businesses. But the government has these cars, they have the money, they have the taxes, but we still are told sometimes that dawa zitakuja next week. Hii wiki hazikufika. So it's a drop of the ball to the government, because if business people are able to do that, why not the government? And if government cannot do it, can they sit down with business people and understand which mechanism they use? Because we see sometimes business people wake up as early as 4 a.m., as early as even 3 a.m. to supply whatever supplies, hata kama ni unga ya ugali, to shops and everywhere else. So why not government? So I feel like government is just collecting money, wanaokota pesa, wanakaa nazo, they don't want to use them in the right way, because you cannot tell me that SHIF, we are simply moving from N to an S, and it has been a whole mess for the last a month or so. Then you tell us that you've fired somebody because they have some irregularities they have done, and yet it's not even running. The institution itself is not running. And we are going to be going back to the question of, until how many lives do we lose for the government to take this seriously? We have seen even people in high ranks as far as MCAs lose their lives in hospitals because we don't have good medical care. So I think it's time that government, it's kama hawawezi kudeal na mambo ya wananchi, they should let then the private sector help them. And we as the young people need to stop being sycophants of this government.
Thank you.
Because today if I go to Nyandarua County and I want to bring change, but if I go back to Mashinani and I cannot listen to the concerns that the people in Mashinani are raising and take them seriously, then what is going to happen in future?
Okay.
So I think it's time that everybody from their own side stands up and calls out this government for what they are. Because if we don't call out this government, they'll continue taking us to a debt and a debt and a debt. And I've heard my brother say that we don't want the president borrowing. We don't have a problem with the government borrowing money as long as we can see what it's doing. We don't have a problem with government taxing Kenyans as long as we can see what those taxes are doing.
Thank you.
But don't overtax us, then we cannot see anything.
Yes.
I think one thing that I'll want to respond to, Ayub, is the the question that has been asked about what will be the consequence about the Gen Z vote block, particularly towards 2027. And I think this is something that you have asked. I mean, it is true, and it is true that the Gen Z block, it has shown, particularly even on June 25th, how if they merge together, they can be such a formidable block towards, creating a political consequence in this country. But Ayub, I would want to respond to this in a very objective manner. Okay. And people who tend to read lines, especially who understand politics in Kenya, the one political, how do I say, the one constant factor that will decide the way 2027 will shape out nationally in this country, I want to be honest, it won't be particularly the Gen Zs. It won't be William Samoei Ruto. It won't be the Mlima vote. It will be one Raila Amolo Odinga. And the reason as to why I'm saying this is because Raila Amolo Odinga is among the political blocks that we have in Kenya. We have had the Gen Z leaders group from Orara, Kebaso, one disintegrating, one led by Kasamuel. They're in different formats. But the one political block that has consistently maintained its fanatical base is one of Raila Amolo Odinga. Any way that Raila Amolo Odinga will be able to support will most likely take the day in 2027. And if you look at even the Gen Z protest that happened, it didn't end, I mean, we must be honest, politically it was responded by Raila Amolo Odinga coming in. Yeah. It is his fanatical base here in Nairobi who said that protests wouldn't continue here. Let us say the truth. Politically responding to the Gen Zs, it was the input of Raila Amolo Odinga coming into government that actually halted it. Yeah. So, in my view, and looking at it objectively, the Gen Z would be a very serious bloc if they start forming themselves right now. If they have a serious leader, one who has the national incentives that people are looking at. Do they have the national aggressiveness to face this government? Do they have the political will to face the people? But if things remain same, and I want to be quoted right, in 2027, the bloc that will be supported by Raila Amolo Odinga, because he has about 30% of his fanatical base that still supports him, will take the day.
That includes the Gen Z?
That includes let me say, you see, and I want us to look at the mathematics. Yeah. For example, let us look at William Samoei Ruto. If you look at William Samoei Ruto, and let us be honest, his huge political base in Mount Kenya is no longer there. He still enjoys about 20 to 25% of his Rift Valley bloc. That is something that we all still know. The Rift Valley bloc is still under William Samoei Ruto. If he merges with there is a fanatical 30%, and it has been shown statistically that still supports Raila. Okay. Yeah. These people from the coast, from Nyanza, from Nairobi, who constantly support Raila. Yeah. So any way that Raila Amolo Odinga, any person whom Raila Amolo Odinga will support in 2027 will take the day.
And your statistics.
Yeah, can we probably weigh into that?
If it is Gachagua supported by Raila Amolo Odinga, he will take the day.
Yes, I'll come to you soon, but the statistics are not scientific.
Yeah, I mean...
No.
But yeah, the contestation...
If you politically, pragmatically look at it, the person whom Raila Amolo Odinga will support in 2027 will take the day.
Absolutely.
He is the constant factor.
Okay, yes, Dan.
I mean, that subject to a lot of things, from a political and governance issues. That dynamic is equally not intact, especially now that he might be going to AU. I mean, that could be a little bit a tinker to that direction.
Either way.
And that means that the instruments of his line of duty do not allow him to take and act politically in issues that are affecting domestic issues. And that probably yes or no. But I think when I was talking about this, I am painstakingly looking at how we are clawing back to the gains that were made by the generational movement and the protest. And I think let's give it a fair hearing and a fair share of it. Some of us saw how that gravitated from virtual to the streets. And I keep on mentioning that deliberately, because when it was beginning, people were very skeptical from all political angles whether this kind of generation were going to leave their comfort zone and actually move in and appear physically to champion for their rights, and politically, steer a movement. But that was true. I think the generation challenged them that in essence, with the technology that is there and with the freedom of speech and political activity that is enshrined in the Constitution to peacefully demonstrate, that aided the protest. While I've also acknowledged that indeed the political class reorganized itself and pacified the gains that were made in that generation, it doesn't mean that generation cannot slowly reorganize itself again,
Exactly.
given the political context that are taking place right now. And let me tell you that, the political figures you've just mentioned here and whether these, you see, we are having a distinguished generation, Ayub. There was a generation here that their parents did not only see any political savior save for Raila Odinga. And I think that is true. But then there is a generation here that do not appreciate that history. Whether it's a prehistory of post-independence, a prehistory of post-1992 ushering of multi-party, there is a generation that believes on fundamental human rights, on service delivery, that do not want to hear any of that kind of or post-independence. And that is a generation that is on the street. And I'm just saying that what they need to master, and I agree with him, what really needs to be mastered is then, can you then convert that kind of huge numbers and sporadic movement into a vote? And that could be the danger of where the political class might get them, because then they will not allow them to access the votes. They will not allow, even as we speak, even the constitutional body that is mandated to roll out election is not constituted. So I think there are this kind of dynamics that we are seeing that indeed could be pacified as we move on, but then we cannot castigate or we cannot shadow the gains that have been made by that generation.
Hussein, they can't be ignored.
They can be ignored, definitely. We definitely can't ignore them. But this generation, and trust me, I'm not a Gen Z. I mean, I'm not even a youth. I've left that bracket. But I have interacted with the Gen Zs for the last few months, and I know how they have been thinking, what they've been saying, and how they've been doing their things. Trust me, this generation is very different from even just the upper generation, the ones that we come from. This generation is driven by facts. This generation is driven by information. There is no sycophancy at all. If Raila was to come here tomorrow and tell people go left, when they believe right is the real answer and solution for this country, they will not follow Raila Amolo Odinga. These are individuals who have benefited from the free primary education. They know what the Constitution of Kenya 2010 is about, and this is about patriotism. And let me just say one thing, and the message to everyone out there. Patriotism is love for your country. It's not love for your government. And if you are patriotic, anyone who comes in the way of your country succeeding, in the way of your country developing, then that person you have to stop, so that your patriotism for your country can actually help your country to move forward. So if the government itself is sabotaging development, is lying, is coming in the way of development, is stopping people from getting employment, is doing all those things, probably what the Catholic bishop said, patriotism is opposing that, because you want your country to move forward. Right. So let's remember, patriotism is love for your country, not love for your government.
All right, let me sample the feedback. I understand there are very many, because we had engaged our audiences from home as well, and I'll give you the final word here briefly so that we finish up. We are out of time. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. But Stay_Boit says the Catholic Church of Kenya owns some of the most expensive hospitals and schools in Kenya. There is a bill in Parliament proposing to tax commercial enterprises owned by the churches. That's the genesis of their outbursts yesterday. Frank Orinde says the challenges facing Kenyans reveal gaps in governance that are hitting the average citizen hard, from the high cost of living to unfulfilled promises to abductions or extrajudicial killings. This administration has fallen short of expectations. Jaya Musoma says church has finally woken up from the slumber. They went to bed with the government for too long. The Catholic leadership is right. That is what Azimio remnants led by Kalonzo have been saying, but the entry of Raila into the broad-based government crippled the opposition. Okelo Mwalimu says, even as we joined clerics in demanding accountable and responsive governance, we must call them out for their involvement in the chaperoning of Siuchawi Nimaombi movement that installed the same government they are now castigating. They misled the masses and must apologize. Esther says, Wakenya kuongea tunajua, lakini mwisho tunaangalia tumbo zetu. I support Eugene. Ahmed says the youth must proceed with the struggle for change. Each generation must make a mark in their struggle for a better Kenya. Babu Michael says, when will the Kenya Kwanza government stop living in denial and accept the issues the way they are? Apart from the bishop's statement, who is feeling that good economy they are talking about? They should know monopoly of ideas and views isn't owned by anyone in Kenya. Remy Butia says the role of the religion in politics is to provide a foundation for people living in our communities. My hope is to see the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops' statement spark respectful conversation about issues that affect and are important to Kenyans. 30 seconds each. Injury, starting with you, and then I'll go to Mark.
Thank you so much. First of all, I want to say that we as the young people have an opportunity, because we don't need to be sycophants of the old money, or we don't need to sing their song for us to bring change. We can stand as individuals across the nation, come together and organically pull change from our respective counties. Okay. Secondly, I hope that the government can maximize on industrialization instead of exporting labor, exporting our brains out there for us to bring the statement of we are taking people abroad. Thirdly, I hope that our parents will not fail us come 2027, because I hope they can listen to us, because the problems that Baba and Ruto and everybody else faced back then when they were young men is not the problems that me and Jerry and everybody else is facing at this point. So I hope when the time comes, the older generation can listen to we, the young people, because it's our future at stake. Today, if this country fails, it's not the older generation that is going to be at risk more than us. We are in our youth, okay, and we need a better generation.
Yes, Mark.
Thank you.
I'll just quickly say this. I mean, to be honestly speaking, I think there is a lot of romanticization about how the young people or the Gen Z will vote and all this. Let us be really honest. I particularly have been to all these universities, particularly here in Nairobi. Look at these young people, how they vote, particularly even in the universities. There is still that ethnic alignment. Go to here, University of Nairobi or Kenyatta University, you will still find those ethnic groups. The Kugema, you'll find the Unagi group, you'll find the Coastal group. They are still there. Even looking back at 2022, okay, the Gen Z group is between 1997 and 2009. Look at those who were eligible voters 1997 to 2004, how they voted in 2022. They still aligned to those all inherently factors. Yeah. So what I'm saying is that, yes, we are a strong vote, we are a strong political vote, okay, but unless we change the inherent values that take us to the ballot, things will still remain the same.
Yes, Eugene.
Thank you. I'll say this. Unajua ukiwa kijana unafikiria wazee ni mafala. Unafikirianga sasa wewe ndo unajua kushinda wazae. But ukweli venye my brother here said, Raila Odinga still has an influence in this country. Be it he wins in AU ama ata win. Still tu ata decide in 2027. Kitu naambia vijana, tushika ID. 2022 mimi nilikuwa na vai. Amungu nipigia kura na mimi ni kijana kama nyinyi. So hakuna vile sasa mtanichocha sahi 2027 mtatupigia. So naomba sana vijana tuingie katika shirika la Wazalendo movement, tuweze kusaidiana kumaliza hii janga la unemployment. Because this is a movement of the jobless masses, by the jobless masses, for the jobless masses, with ideas on patriotism, climate change, smart farming, to change the narrative of unemployment. Manake hawa wazee hata tuseme aje hawatakuja kutumalizia hili janga la unemployment. Ni sisi lazima tushikane, na naweza wanaharakati kama Bwana Khalid, wakitoka huko nje kujaribu kupigania haki za vijana, pia wajaribu kueneza vijana kuweza si kupigania tu haki, ni nini unaweza fanya ukipigania pia haki. Isikuwe tu tunatoka nje tunafanya demonstration, pia tutoke nje tujifunze ukulima, tutoke nje tuelewe pia mambo ya mental health, ndio hata mengine nachangia kwa mambo ya femicide. Tuweze kusaidiana kama vijana, tusonge mbele, tujenge taifa.
Much appreciated. Yes, Dan.
30 seconds. The need to redefine our national values and principles of governance, that we have to be a value-driven country that will cure us from all these things. Number two is that there is a need for citizen obligation, civic education, still a problem. And I think we need to have a lot of educating the public on their rights and educating the public on the obligation as well. So then that we are able to cure the nation from all these, who is better be a candidate, who is not that candidate. And I think lastly, I think Ayub is for us to condemn in all forms, all sorts of crime. Whether it is state sanctioned, whether it is criminals, because then the moment we are not tackling and deterring crime, then they graduate to be something else. And in this sense, I think I am still alarmed the rates of femicides that is happening in this country.
All right.
Simply because we didn't tackle it. It's related to abduction, it's related to everything. So I think it's important for us to take an action as citizens.
Thank you. Yes, Hussein.
Thank you. My message is, of course, to all Kenyans, Gen Zote, and, to tell them that we are at a very critical point in the history of our nation to steer this country in the right direction. And this is not the responsibility of any single individual or any single generation or the government. It is our responsibility collectively, each and every one of us. Wherever you are, whatever you are doing, ask yourself, how can you help in steering this country in the right direction? Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And this is your time.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. Jerry Kahiga is the National Youth Leader, the PNU Party. Hussein Khalid is the Chief Executive Officer of Vocal Africa. Dan Orogo commentates on governance. Eugene Oponyo, the Chairperson of Wazalendo Movement. And Mark Ouko is the Youth Coordinator, the National Students' Council. Thank you for your time, much appreciated.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thanks to you too for waking up with us here on the broadcast and sending in your views here, and we could sample the few that we had managed to. Many thanks for your company here in the course of this broadcast, and we'll see you next week sometime, God willing, by the grace of God. Up next is Bensu and his next segment, which will be focusing on this Furahi Friday. Till then, good morning.